Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming, and welcome to the August Veterans Meeting. Before we start, I'd like Chaplain Terry to do an invocation.
We make our beginning in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Father, you have planned all our days before there was even a day. You have put the Holy Spirit into hearts and minds of many who have served our country, who have laid down their life, who have been wounded, prisoners of war, and all for the sake of the children here, that we may have a life that you have bestowed graciously upon our land. We give thanks for the courage of all who have served. We give thanks for the courage for all who have served in ways that we don't understand. We ask you to bless us this day, that we will always remember the love and the sacrifice given to have the blessed freedom that we have this day. Bless us, be with us, guide us. In our most precious Savior's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Now, we have two speakers today, and one, you'll see his name up there, Larry Mrazek, and then we have, he's going to tell us about, it says it up there, military journey and experiences, and then we have Casey Kiehl, and Casey's going to talk to us about his father's experience in World War I and about the diary his father kept during that conflict. You know, the war to end all wars, they called it. Now, two things before Larry gets up, and one is on the table over there are some military magazines. And these are from Ken Winkler, and he has many more of these, but he would like to share those with anybody that would like to read them. So if you want to read one of those, and we're going to have quite a few more in the months to come, just take it, read it, and then put it back in his mail slot, which is 102, that's his apartment number. And so again, he just wants to share them, but he definitely wants them back. So next meetings we'll have more of those. I think there are 3 right now. And the other thing I want to mention is there's a 2022 federal regulation or an additional veteran benefits that was approved, and that is called the PACT Act. That's P-A-C-T, and that has to do with extending benefits and creating some new ones for veterans and their spouses that have been exposed to toxic substances in the many wars, you know, Vietnam basically up through current. So there's some information on that table also that tells you a little bit about it, but it tells you how to get more information. And if you have problems getting that, I can probably track it down. And for this information, Nancy's here. This is something Nancy found out about and got the information, and she's working now on getting a speaker to come in and tell us more about the PACT Act. So you can get that piece of paper, or there's 2 pieces to 2 paper, stapled together, 2 pages, and look at it, and then if you need more, let me know, I'll run more copies. So anyway, that's on the table, the magazines, and all about the PACT Act. So thank you, Nancy.
You want to tell them that we're working and trying to get a screening done here?
Yeah, I get a speaker.
Yeah, we're trying to get a screening done here.
That's a screening.
So that people can...
Yeah, people that, in addition to a speaker, Nancy is seeing if they'll come here and screen individuals if you would like. whether you've been exposed. And so that's all underway, thanks to Nancy. So anyway, now we'll hear from Larry first, Larry Mrazek, and then followed by Casey. So Larry.
My experience, can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear okay? Okay. My experience in the military is quite different from most of the other people here that have spoken before. And that is that I was initially supposed to serve 2 years. However, in 1955, the President and Congress and the Defense Department chose to reduce the requirements of active duty from 2 years for officers coming into the service to 6 months plus 7.5 years active reserves. And this didn't make a lot of us happy, but it probably might have even saved my life insofar as maybe going over to Vietnam or some of these other places. But anyway, my military journey started in high school. I went to Missouri Military Academy, Mexico, Missouri. We had a lot of Coast Guard drill, a lot of discipline that was really important at that time for me to learn a little bit more about what to do in the case of a military experience. And we also had extensive training in weapons. And I'll just show you a couple right here. One is the M1 rifle on my left, this one, and the other the Browning automatic rifle. Initially, we would field strip the M1 rifle and both the M1 rifle and the Browning automatic rifle. However, we were taught to take the M1 rifle all the way down to including the peak parts of the trigger housing group. And this will come up later on in my talk as being a very interesting situation. After graduating from Missouri Military Academy, I was a cadet captain at that time, as company commander. I attended Washington University in St. Louis, and at that time, we had anti-aircraft artillery was the main ROTC at that time. And what's interesting is that the engineering school, I was a civil engineering student. The civil engineering student, we had a lot of math and science, etc. And I felt sort of sorry for the liberal arts people because they had a heck of a time solving the problems of anti-aircraft artillery. But anyway, we did have an interesting time at Washington U. And during my junior and senior year, this is really interesting. We went to Fort Leonard Wood for summer camp, which was really boot camp. You went as a future officer. You went through probably even rough training than the recruits do. And at that time at Fort Leonard Wood, we would build bridges across the Big Piney River, and it was about 120 degrees, and it was really miserable. We thought we had heat last week or the week before. That was nothing compared to Fort Leonard Wood that 1954. Anyway, many of us thought it wouldn't be nice if we just sort of fell into the Big Piney River when it was so hot out there. But and also it hadn't rained, and there was dust, a foot or so thick on the roads when you were marching. It'd come up and hit you in the face. It was not a happy time. And but anyway, after going through all of this, we also had to train and march other students, other ROTC students, and I learned one thing there that I always had remembered as an officer. When you're marching a troop, you think about the troops first, and secondly, if somebody interrupts you. Anyway, the cadre guy decided he was going to ask questions to this one ROTC student, and the student didn't pay any attention to marching the troops. They went into the woods while he was trying to answer the questions. The right thing to do was to halt him, get him at ease, and then say, "Yes, sir, what do you want?" But anyway, that was an important part of our summer camp. Oops. I'm just showing some pictures. My grandson did a lot of this and helped me on this slide presentation. And over to the right there, you see the anti-aircraft artillery. Oops. There you go, the anti-aircraft artillery. After graduating from Washington University with BS in civil engineering and then a second lieutenant commission, I attended Fort Belvoir, Virginia, basic officer training. And this is the first 2 weeks at Fort Belvoir was a weeding out process. And that is, if you didn't pass the physical and mental parts of this 2 weeks experience, you lost your commission and were given your name given to the draft board. At that time, it wasn't a happy time to have your name in the draft board. But anyway, at Fort Belvoir, those first 2 weeks, we'd do running. And I still remember the guy's, the lieutenant's name. He was a first lieutenant. To me, he could have been a general. I mean, this guy was like a deer. He could run and run and run and not have any problems with doing that. And we followed, most of us followed, but some of the guys had just gotten married, and they were really in trouble. Because they got sick along the run, because, I mean, we really literally ran for 45, 50 minutes, and then on top of that, did push-ups, sit-ups, chin-ups, and trained the platoon in close order drill and other physical fitness type experiences. And here it shows a couple of pictures here. At Fort Belvoir, then, after the 2 weeks, if you pass the first 2 weeks, you're in good shape. The last part of the 2 weeks, the last day and evening, I should say, was going through the infiltration course. Now let me explain, if none of you have ever gone through the infiltration course, because some of you probably have. There's a flat field with trench on each end of the field, and in this flat area are barbed wire enclosures with TNT explosives. And your requirement is to crawl carefully over the top of this trench and crawl through the field, and then crawl over the top of it, down into the trench, and duck walk out to the other entrance. Anyway, we did this 3 times. One time, just as an introductory by the number type deal. Then the second time during the day, we did it with machine gun fire. Now these had these machine guns, 30 caliber machine guns, set up on a table type steel and firing over your head. And if you got up, it was all over, babe. And so anyway, at the count of a whistle blowing, you would crawl over the top, and you had a steel helmet on. Crawl over the top and crawl through the field. And guess what? It started raining about that time. And you crawl through this field, and at each interval, they kick off these TNT explosives. And at first it scares you a little bit, but it was trying to demonstrate what it would be like in combat if you were in the same situation. So anyway, after that, we crawled through this enclosure, and by that time there were a lot of puddles all over the field, and the temperature was dropping, and we were soaking wet. And this one guy said, "Larry," he said, "I'm gonna try to go around all these puddles and save the time duck walking out of the trench." I said, "I don't think I'd do that if I were you." Well, anyway, he goes through this, all I could hear was profanities. He hit every puddle trying to get out of there. Then our night deal, by that time, it was really miserable. I mean, it was raining, and we were starting to freeze, and you went through, and a searchlight would go on, and when that searchlight went on, you froze. And then as soon as it went off, you'd start crawling again. Meanwhile, the same thing happened, the TNT explosion popping up ever so often. And after you went through this enclosure and got out, duck walked out, and that was the other thing, this other guy didn't like to duck walk, because it was hard on your legs and everything. So I said, "I'll duck walk anyway rather than crawling through all these puddles." But anyway, after that, we got through that. It was, like I said, it was a sandy field. And that night, we were in the tents. We literally froze. And the officer on duty had to come back and bang us on our chest to get some of the ice off so he could actually move. After that, we went to a large field with tarps. We disassembled our weapon and cleaned it. And it was really interesting. This goes back to my experience at MMA. The only thing most people did was to field strip the weapon and try to clean it. And of course, the trigger housing group is one of the key items in an M1 rifle at that time. And you had a lot of grit and dirt there. And nobody was passing the inspection. You'd go to inspection arm and bingo, you could hear the gritty noise. So I took the whole thing all the way down, including the trigger housing. I had it all laid out, all these parts. And I can still remember the guy's name, Lieutenant Warren. He was the first lieutenant. To me, he could have been the general. Anyway, he said, "Lieutenant," he said, "you shouldn't be doing this. This is an ordnance deal." I said, "Bear with me, sir." And after that, I was able to take the whole thing down, put it back together, went over, passed inspection just like that. And he was sort of impressed on that. But I can still remember that particular incident. After the first 2 weeks at Fort Belvoir, we spent primarily doing class work, and many of the classes included drainage, structures, foundations, similar to what we had in our instruction at Washington U. And then we also had different projects that we did. And I'm going to go through some of them. When we built bridges, and by the way, we did some of these bridges at Fort Leonard Wood at boot camp. But one like the September Trestle Bridge, I just want to be sure it's shown on the screen. The modular Bailey Bridge it's a metal steel bridge. And by the way, these were all built over the ravine or into the river. Now, I was told from seeing some of the talks that were given that the Bailey Bridge, similar to the Bailey Bridge, is actually built on land and then lifted over the ravine or over the water. So you're not working over a high area trying to build the bridge on over water or anything. And then, of course, there's the pontoon bridge. You can see the pontoons, and the officer in charge of building these bridges was required to either walk over or ride over in a vehicle before anybody else went across the bridge. So in other words, if this baby broke down, you went down first, and your men were safe. After experiencing my actually it was 3 months at Fort Belvoir, I was assigned to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and at that time I taught ROTC students similar to what I had gone through 2 years prior to that. And at Fort Leonard Wood, I also, I also was in charge of vehicular inspection. Now this is really great. Here's a civil engineer. I didn't know up from down of the engine of a deuce and a half or whatever the kind of vehicle that. But anyway, I was assigned to the motor pool and told to inspect these vehicles. Well, what I did was I had a little manual, and I'd crawl under the deuce and a half and look up, and I guess there's a leak there. Luckily I had a contact, a warrant officer who was really sharp at vehicles, and he and I would look at it and we'd write up something. Well, anyways, to make a long story short, that seemed to be a pretty good deal because I was congratulated on my time there, and I thought I did a terrible job. I didn't know what I was doing. And but anyway, after being relieved from active duty at Fort Leonard Wood, I then went to graduate school at the University of Missouri and spent the rest of my time in the active reserves. Oops. In the active reserves, where I spent 1 month, 1 day a month, I should say, one evening or day a month in reserve meetings, and 2 weeks in summer camp. One summer camp was really interesting because I had done a lot of surveying, including being a survey chief. I was given the job of doing a complete outbound survey of the Camp McCoy premises, which was really good because I knew that's one time I knew what I was doing. I wasn't inspecting some truck that I didn't know one engine from the other. And so anyway, that's pretty much my experiences in the military. After that, I spent 7.5 years in the active reserves. So it's all yours, Casey.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And now, you ready, Casey?
Yeah, I think so. Give it a shot. Get Larry's one bottle here. Here you go, Larry.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
First of all, thank you, Beth, for jazzing up my slide to see all the flags there. I couldn't ever do that. She did that. And secondly, Hank, thank you for keeping our veterans group going. It's greatly appreciated, always interesting. Several months back, I found my dad's World War I 11-page diary. I sent several pages over to Hank to see if he thought this would be of any interest to our veterans group. Hank said he thought it would be, so here it is. First, this is not a story of World War I battles fought or injuries received while fighting like Velma and Dad's father. Rather, it is a more humorous diary since my dad did not have to go overseas to fight. Armistice Day was declared about 2 months after he was drafted. See if I can get the next slide here. Maybe I'll do the clicker. Oh, I use the arrow. Okay. Okay. First, a little about my dad. As shown in this slide, he was born on April Fool's Day, 1897. He would always play April Fool's jokes on us later on when he came back. In the small town of Drake, Missouri. His family moved to the town of Alma, Missouri in the early 1900s. Alma, Missouri is a small farming community of about 350 people, about 60 miles east of Kansas City. The U.S. entered World War I in April 1917, and Dad got drafted about a year and a half later and entered service on September 4th, 1918 at the ripe old age of 21. Fortunately for him, armistice was declared about 2 months later, so he did not have to go overseas. He was discharged on March 6, 1919. Okay, it worked. Here are a couple of pictures from Dad's diary. At the bottom slide, if you take a look at the salutes, I think they're pretty good for all three men, don't you? They're very, very good. Beth, again, you showed me. Oh, there we go. Okay, now I got it. This is a copy of my dad's enlistment paper. I know it is hard to read. A couple of entries are interesting. There's a line that says, horsemanship. It is stamped as not mounted. Also, knowledge of any vocation, farmer. Wounds received in service, none. Okay, of course, he didn't go overseas. Character, excellent. I'm not sure when this was filed. Okay, this is a copy of my dad's discharge. Wanted to give you a little history of Camp MacArthur, because that's where Dad was sent. It was established 10 weeks after the U.S. declared war on Germany in 1917 in Waco, Texas, and was named after General Arthur MacArthur, Medal of Honor recipient who served in Civil and Spanish-American War. This was the infantry replacement and training camp. Recruits from Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, and New Mexico were sent to Camp MacArthur, Waco, Texas. The camp closed on March 7th, 1919. So here are just some of the pictures. I know they're not very good, but gives you some idea of where Dad went. All these barracks in a row.
I don't see any trees.
I know I read it down, but just kind of give that's a little bit clearer picture there. You can see all the buildings in a row. Okay. So here's where the diary starts. Served in World War I, was drafted September 4th, 1918. 22 boys were drafted from Lafayette County. We all left from Lexington in the morning on the Missouri Pacific Railroad on a freight train. We all piled in the caboose of the train. Some were inside, others on the platform, and a few on top of the caboose. Arrived in Sedalia at noon. We were transferred to the MK&T Railroad here in Sedalia. We had regular passenger cars. This train started in St. Louis and picked up boys from various counties along its line. The last stop where we picked up boys was in Nevada, Missouri. It was about 9 o'clock p.m. and it had about 10 coaches of boys bound for Waco, Texas. At daybreak, we were in Oklahoma, and nightfall we arrived in our camp at Waco, Texas, Camp MacArthur. We were housed 4 boys to a tent, size about 12 by 12 feet. The side walls were about 4 feet high. Then the canvas came together in the middle to a point about 12 feet high. My first day was in a Section A, 1st Battalion. Each company had about 50 tents, and on one end was a wooden building in which were a laboratory and toilets. On the opposite end were the kitchen and dining room, and next was for the officers' housing. September 6th and 7th, loafed around to be called for our Army examination. They took us to a medical building in which various doctors examined us. After the examination, we got rid of all of our civilian clothes and shoes, and the person in charge took a good look at us and gave us our Army clothes. If it did not fit us, either too big or too small, we could exchange it later. How did I come out of the examination? What did they find wrong on my health? Well, all was okay health-wise except on one defect, flat-footed to some extent. September 8th, started drilling. The drill field was close by, and from there we had to attend revelry every morning and retreat every night. When the bugler horns were sounded, we all came out of our tents and lined up in our company street in front of our tents. This we also had to do after breakfast, and then were marched to drill fields where we learned various Army commands such as attention, forward march, to the rear march, squad's right march, squad's left march, double time march, and of course company halt. While we were marching, the corporals and sergeants would yell at us, eyes up. If we looked down, we could not see our enemies. So we were always reminded to look straight forward so as to see any enemies. We drilled hard all day and were tired at night. I remember one day we were taking a long hike to a point on the river close by called Lover's Leap. It was a high bluff overlooking the river. This long march was tiresome. September 29th. Boys in the development were put there for another examination to see how we stood those three weeks of strenuous training. I had it made the best time of my life and also the best weeks in my entire life. This was in the development camp. We were fed 3 good meals a day, nothing to do but lay around in our tents, sleep, write letters, and visit with our Army buddies. I had gotten used to the way of Army life a little and got in a good standing with our sergeant. We issued a pass that after supper I could go down to Waco to town, and on Sundays I could go to the Lutheran church in Waco. We did not have service in the camp, so on Sundays I went to the Lutheran church. We had streetcar connection from the camp entrance to downtown Waco, also to the church. I believe we had to be back at the camp at 11 p.m. The reason for such leisure time was that we had to be re-examined. All of us had some little defects in life, and I suppose they did not have enough doctors for the job. So finally, after about 3 weeks, I had another examination. I especially remember one doctor examined my feet, and he asked me various questions of the 3-week drilling, marching, and how I felt. I answered, it did not bother me. Then he asked me how about your feet? After the day's drilling and marching, did they hurt you? Pain you anywhere in your legs? I told him that nothing bothered my feet, no pains, no swelling. As I went further to other doctors, I got to thinking, why did this doctor ask me so many questions about my feet? As I got to the end of the line to the last person, I asked him, how did my re-examination turn out? Why was I examined especially on my feet, and why so many questions asked about marching and drilling? Here's the answer he gave me. Buddy, you are all okay. You passed all examinations, and the reason you were put in the development camp was because you are somewhat flat-footed. But you passed on that okay now, and we will keep you in the Army. Really, none of the drafted boys liked to be in the Army, and I was one of them. So later in my tent, I scratched my head and said to myself, if I would have known this before I was examined by the doctor who examined my feet and asked me all those questions, my answer to him perhaps would have been entirely different. I would have given this kind of an answer, that drilling and the marching really made me so tired, my feet hurt me so bad after the day's drilling and marching, that after supper, I just laid on my cot to rest my feet. Maybe I would have been sent home. Lots of the boys with me in the camp were given a medical discharge. My friend Fred Aversman did not pass. He had bad lungs and was sent home, and poor me had to stay back. This examination was given to us by October 20th. After being here several days, the sergeant called us out of the company and asked that any of you boys that can drive horses or mules step forward. So I stepped forward, and then with other boys that could drive, I was detached from this company to another part of the camp where they had horses, barns, and stables. They assigned some particular job to several of the boys. Job 1 was for several boys to feed all horses morning and night, harness the horse to a wagon, clean the stables during the day, and so on. Okay, we're going to go a little bit past here. Okay, Armistice Day. On Armistice Day that night, I will remember how all the boys in the camp celebrated till early morning hours, shouting, yelling for joy, since no more need of boys to be trained. This job of hauling supplies ended, and about November 14th, we were transferred back to our company. We had to drill some now and again. The officers gave us lectures. Just to add, Elmer Knepmeyer and Henry Hensick were shipped out about November 7th to the East Coast and were loaded on ship to go across to France in the battle. But since the armistice was signed, they stopped them from going across and were given a discharge in several weeks. Reinhold Nienheiser took the flu about 1 week before Knepmeyer left for New Jersey and stayed back. So this is what happened after Armistice Day, November 14th to February 28th. I received this book on November 24th from Camp Pastor Reverend Wackholz while attending church in Waco. The title of the book is Remember. It had morning and evening prayers, Apostles' Creed, verses of God's promise to be at our side during the Army days and in our battalion war. And I also received some stationery. November 25th. Dreary and foggy day. Did not drill, but were given lectures in the mess hall. Lieutenant asked some of the boys to recite the general orders of the Army. Most of the boys knew it. Then he came to one. He could not recite the general orders. Lieutenant asked him various other questions about the Army rules, but the boy could not answer any of them. Then the lieutenant asked this boy, "What are you in the Army for?" The boy jumped up and immediately replied, "Just because I cannot get out." All the boys started laughing. November 26th, another foggy day, no drilling. 150 men too lazy to cut enough wood for the cooks to cook us the meals. December 1st, calm and bright. In the morning on company police. This was to pick up all paper, cigarette butts, trash, and so forth. A lot of the veterans here have probably done that. Attended big dinner in Waco Cotton Palace with a choir. Singing after supper. Attended service in Lutheran Church and took large supper. Took 3 girls home. December 22nd. Prison chaser all day with bayonets attached and 2 bullets. I had 2 prisoners, so there was 1 bullet for each. In the camp, they had a prison for any of the soldiers in the camp that committed a crime. The prison was about 1 block square, encircled with barbed wire 4 inches apart, and fence was about 10 feet high. Then at the top of an extension of 3 feet to the inside, also with barbed wire, so nobody could crawl over the fence. Inside of the fence were tents for the prisoners. Here I experienced some of the ways of the funny Army rules. At the entrance, the sergeant would call one of the guards with the rifle loaded and bayonets attached. Next, he called out 2 prisoners. The sergeant merely said, "Follow them." So all I could do was to follow them. So they walked to stables and had to clean them. After they got finished, they joined another pair of prisoners and guard in the stables. To my surprise, they pulled out a pair of dice and started shooting craps. So I and the other guards stood there in amazement and watched them play. We had no orders to stop their game, so when they got through with the game, they pulled up stakes and marched back to the prison, and we turned in our rifles and went back to our company. It rained that night. December 31st, damp, rainy day on prison guard all day. Afternoon guarded 1 prisoner to visit his friends and also to barber shop to get haircut. I asked him, how come you got in this prison? He answered, buddy, one day I was doing the same you're doing now, guarding a prisoner. He got away from me. I have to serve out his term at night writing letters in YMCA. God alone shall receive thanks and honor for good health in the Army during this year, 1918 in the Army. January 4th. Was put on table waiter at the officers' mess. The highest officers, General, Lieutenant Colonel, and Brigadier General of the camp ate here. I made all kinds of mistakes. Just imagine a farm boy to be put as table waiter. I did not know anything about waiting on the tables, nor did the other 4 boys that had the same job. And as the general sat down at the table, we would take his order. He would say, eggs up or eggs over, soft boiled, hard boiled, toast, coffee, black. This was at breakfast. We'd go in the kitchen, turn in our orders. I did not get all the orders right. Then, as I carried it to the table when the cook had it ready, I got mixed up and placed the order to the wrong person. I had not heard of such term from my mother and another at the breakfast table. We ate what she gave us. At noon or night, orders for meat were steak, roast, well done, fried lightly raw. What did we know about this? January 5th. All day again at officer's mess as table waiter. I was so stupid, made errors aplenty. Meals good enough for president, king, queen. We table waiters had to wait till all had eaten. Then we could eat. We got the same good big meals as they did. I sure ate all I was good for. Never at home did we get meals like this. But he was very well fed. January 6th, Monday. Same thing. Table waiter. I was given grouchy remarks for my stupidness and awkwardness when I served them the wrong food or prepared wrong. January 7th, again, same job. Got along much better. 100 boys left for Camp Funston to get their discharge, and poor me left behind. February 24th, Monday. On fatigue. Gold bricked all day. At night had a crap game and a great fun to see them play. During my entire Army life, I did not shoot craps, but this evening one friend of mine shooting craps could not make his point. So for a joke, while I was watching them play, I said, let me throw the dice. So I threw them for him and made the points and was raking money in for him. The other players objected now, so I gave the dice back to him. Okay, glorious morning, received discharge. The glorious morning when I received my discharge from the Army. Oh, joy. Ate breakfast at 6 a.m. Polished up for last time and marched to receive our pay and discharge. Left by train at 10:30 a.m. Got home to the town of Alma about 6 p.m. in the train called Plug. Okay, now here's some really important lessons that my dad wrote down. I'd like for you all to be careful and take some good notes of these, because these are really important. Lessons learned, very, very important. To take charge of these spuds and all gravy in view. To watch my plate in a military manner. Keeping eyes on the alert for any stray sausage that comes within sight or view. To report any bread sliced too thick to the mess sergeant. To repeat all calls for seconds. To quit my table only when satisfied there is nothing left. To receive, but not pass on to the soldier next to me any meat, cabbage, or beans left by the non-coms, buck privates, or cooks. To talk to no one who eats onions. In case of fire in the mess hall, to grab all eatables left by others in their escape. To allow no one to steal anything in the line of grub. You can sure tell that food was from the mind of my dad. He was a 21-year-old. He must have always been hungry. In any case not covered by instruction, to call the company clerk or sergeant major. To salute all chickens, beefsteaks, ham and eggs, and liver. To be especially watchful at the table and during the time for eating, to challenge anyone who gets more prunes than myself. Okay. So the last slide is letters received. A total of 165 letters received from 20 persons. My dad must have been a meticulous person to keep track of all this. 14 females and 14 males, half and half. It's kind of interesting. The Young Folk Society of our local church gave me 2 small books published by the Walter League of Sin entitled Lutheran Hymnal and Prayer Book and Boys Under the Flag. These books contain 51 hymns, especially for boys in service, prayers for all occasions in the Army life, comforting scripture passages and prayers written in German language by my dear mother and sister Christine. This was a great comfort to me, and so is the entire book. So that's the end of it. I have any questions, be happy to answer any questions. Oh, question way in the back.
I have a question. Did he marry Frida?
No, he married Ida. He got married in 1928, so he got married when he was a little bit older. And see, when I was born, it was he was 35, so he had me later on in life. So being quite a bit older than me, never quite as close as maybe someone if you have a younger child, you know, you get pretty close to them. But he was a very strict guy and very businesslike. Well, I knew him, didn't really realize he had such humor until I started reading his diary. Once he retired, he kind of let up a little bit. Anything else? And thank you in the audience very much for listening to this.
Thank you, Casey. That was funnier than I thought it would be. Yeah. So was your father a farmer when he was?
Now, when he returned, he was become a manager of a farmers cooperative elevator. They had cooperative elevators there in Alma, Missouri, Waverly, Missouri, Malta, and he was kind of the manager of these elevators. That's what he did for a living.
Thank you very much, you and Larry. And just let you know that September we are not having a meeting because of Labor Day on Monday. And then in October, we're going to have a guy by the name of Jim Higgins, who is the director of the St. Charles County Veterans Museum, which is located in O'Fallon, Missouri. He will be talking to us in October. And then in November, we won't have our regular meeting at the first Monday. Instead, we'll meet on Veterans Day, November the 11th. And Ken Winkler's daughter, Ann, who has been here before, will be our speaker. So no meeting next month. October will be Jim Higgins from St. Charles County Veteran Museum, and November will be Ken Winkler's daughter. So thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you not next month, but October.